welcome to the Purposeful MD podcast. As a physician, you've sacrificed so much of your life for other people, your patients, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. What would it feel like to spend time doing what you enjoy and to live without guilt? I'm your host, Dr. Laura Sutton, a family physician, certified coach, and business owner. If you're a medical professional on a journey towards your most purposeful life, a life with more time and energy, and ultimately more joy, then this is the podcast for you. Well, thank you, Dr. Amy Vertrees, for being on with us today on the Purposeful MD podcast. Great to have you. Great to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm so excited that you launched this podcast. I mean, the topics are so interesting and important. I mean, this is so needed. I'm really glad you're in this space.
Yeah, thanks. I love it. I love it. And I love talking to amazing people like you.
Likewise.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into coaching and your current path in life.
Sure. I'll keep it very, very brief. I was in the Army for 17 years. So I trained in the Army and I fulfilled my commitment. I went on 3 deployments. And then I did what everybody was told to do, which is got an employed job. And I was in a good job at a community hospital. It's exactly what I wanted, which was to be a broad-based general surgeon. And but the employed thing, I was a little bit just unhappy with my ability to navigate the clinic. And, like, why am I working around people that seem like they can't stand me? Like, why is everything so hard? And around this time was when 2020, my 3-year contract was up, and I suddenly decided to open up a private practice, as one does in a pandemic. Why not?
Right.
But I had this idea that I just wanted to have the life that I wanted. And I could see myself being in this good job that I had for, another 15 years, complaining about the same things over and over again. So I decided to take a chance on me. And that was very scary, but it was also like the best thing I could have possibly done, because I started realizing I am actually the one controlling my life and controlling my schedule. And, things come up that we can't control, but for the most part, we tell ourselves we have to do certain things. And I just realized I didn't. So 3 years ago, actually 4 years almost now, I opened up a private practice. I hired all my people. It's been an interesting, remarkable challenge every year, because it's always a little bit different. Every time you achieve one level, you go to a different level, like, oh, look, what's coming on now. So I used all of the lessons that I learned in becoming a attending surgeon. And I put it in a book called Become the Boss MD, Success Beyond Residency, which was, what I knew at the time. And of course, I've learned a lot of new lessons since then, because this came out last year. And I'm always learning. And coaching has been really the transforming aspect of that. So I'm also a coach for surgeons primarily. And I have a program that's a year long where we talk about complications, dealing with difficult partners, stop hating clinic. I mean, that's the best I could do, but it's about efficiency and things like that, and negotiating, because I think these are the 4 main categories of things that cause us a lot of distress.
Yeah, I love that so much. I read your book. It's amazing. And I love the tagline of Success Beyond Residency, because I think that for a lot of physicians, we feel like, well, once we get to be an attending, once we get to be in private practice, everything's going to be amazing and
Yeah.
I will have arrived. And I'm sure you see that a lot, and people
Oh,
just
yeah.
sometimes feel like, hey, this isn't all that I thought it was going to be.
I mean, it's actually both true, right? Yes, you have a ride, and there's all these new things that you have to do.
Right, right. With
Different level, different devil.
yeah, with each new step comes different challenges, like you said.
Exactly. And so I think, acknowledging that we're not alone, I think that's a nice thing about talking with people. And, I have a podcast too. And it's when you start sharing these stories, the very first thing that you start to realize is that I am not alone in my thinking. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. Other people have this too, that maybe it is not me personally that has a problem. Maybe this is a normal challenge that everyone has. And so now we already start depersonalizing our problems. And now we can be in a space where we can solve it, because now we're not trying to fix ourselves. We now have a problem to solve, and that's way different.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge step. I love that so much, that we're really, like you said, depersonalizing, taking ourselves out of the equation instead of feeling like we're the ones that are broken and need to be fixed, is that know that there's an actual challenge that a lot of other physicians face. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing that I get asked all the time, which I know that we kind of talked about before recording, is like, how do we get all the things that we want done? And I get asked all the time, like, you're a full-time surgeon, and looking at my RVUs, I'm above the average general surgeon in RVUs, and I'm also a full-time coach. Like, how do you do both? And I have two kids that could pick me out of a lineup, and I'm still married. You know, and I think it all has to do with how we spend our time. And I think the one thing that I've learned early on, but certainly with a lot more clarity recently, is just how much we can actually get done in a day. And it's not like an achievement thing of like, I have to do all these things. When you start really being purposeful about what you choose to do, that really changes how you approach life. So there's definitely a lot to that.
Yeah, that's so important. And what you said again before when we were chatting before this is about our calendar and that we have to take control and our calendar doesn't own us. It's the other way around. And that can be
Yes,
really profound.
there's like one thing, I mean, it's a fact, and we just don't even look at this fact, but everyone knows is true when I say that. There's like literally only 24 hours in a day. Like we have a defined boundary of time that none of us can do anything about, but we don't think of it at all, honestly. And if we do think about it, it brings up, fear of like, how could I possibly get everything done in this time, which is usually why we ignore that time because we haven't looked at our time in a purposeful way of saying, what do I actually want to do? What do I choose to do? And typically involves, what do I have to give up to do the things that I want to do in this limited amount of time that we have?
Yeah, that's all just so many nuggets in what you just said there about how we manage our time and how we even think about it. So what's your first step as you approach if you're working with a client who's struggling with this? How do you start?
Well, my very first and best and ongoing client who needs lots of help is me.
Absolutely. We're all our own best and worst clients sometimes.
Yes. So I got a lot of information from many different sources. So I'm a voracious reader, and it doesn't take much to read a lot. I mean, like 10 minutes a day on the phone. I mean, that's one thing deployments offered me, is that I always had my phone on me so you can always catch 10 minutes here and there. So I read a lot of books, and a lot of people have the similar idea too of like, how do we approach this limited amount of time we have? Because it's everybody's problem. Everyone has the same problem of trying to solve what we do at this time. So I have a lot of experiences with things like Monday Hour One with Brooke Castillo, and the Getting Things Done is another book that I read. The Now Habit, and everyone has the same thing. Is like, we have this limited amount of time and space. These are our boundaries, so it becomes a boundary issue. Now, boundaries are always hard because we think boundaries are hard to say, I have to do only this in this period of time. But I think that we've all discovered, if you do a lot of boundary work, it's actually where your freedom is.
Mhm.
So when I approach my week, I approach it very similar to Monday Hour One. And another one is Lisa Woodruff. She does Organized 365 with the Sunday Basket. There's several core things that I have. One is the calendar in front of me for the week. I usually work by the week. And then I have like everything in one place. So it took me a while to get everything into one place. I mean, sometimes it looks like a hot mess of a space, but it's all in one place.
Mhm.
And when I sit down, once a week and I look at my calendar, I see like, okay, what do I need to do? So the very first thing that I do are the things that I absolutely have to do. These are my clinics days. These are my operating days. These are my coaching calls. These are specific meetings that I want to do. Like these on the calendar, and I do the time blocking. I put them on there like, this is what must be done. I describe it as a block on there that to move that, I have to like pry it off. Like that is the boundary here. I have to do this and nothing else in that particular time frame. That leaves actually a tremendous amount of white space if you look at it. So that's really the things that we want to work with, is what do we do with the free time? And there's several different things that we all do. One is that we don't plan it at all because we already on some level know that it's not possible to do what we want to do. So we just don't even look at the calendar, like total denial.
Mhm. Yep.
And then the other one is I want to do all these things and I can't say no to anything. We fill it so much that we lose the enjoyment out of life. And then there's, a lot of us, especially as physicians, where we can't plan, all of the times. So that's where I have the blocks that don't move. And then on the side of my calendar, I use the purpose planner. I really like that. It has like things on the side where I put what's called like a floating list. These are all the things that I look at this week that I want to accomplish. And before that, I had this like hot mess of all my things that I want to do. Because for me, it's very reassuring to have everything on paper that I can look at.
Hmm.
So my list is sort of like the dream list. And this is how I started my private practice and got over the overwhelm of that, is I wrote all the things that I thought I needed to do. And it doesn't take that long to brain dump that. And then I decided what goes on the calendar, and it had to fit on a block in the calendar to go on there. And the floating list was sort of like wishful thinking. And researchers said you can only really do like 3 things in a day. So I usually pick like 3 things I want to accomplish. So you can keep it easy for yourself. And it's not easy at first. It takes a little while for you to really start telling yourself the truth about what you really want to do and what you are capable of doing in the time frame that's given, which is limited for all of us. So that's one way I approach it. Brain dump, blocks of time that don't move, a floating list. And the things that don't make it on that limited week-long sheet are things that are, this actually became a running joke in our private practice. It's on the list. And if I say it's on the list, give it up. It's never happening. If I
Right.
say it's on the calendar, that's something different. That's actually going to happen.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you bring up a really good point is that we can't accomplish everything that we want to be able to do. And so we have to really prioritize and pick and choose. And it sounds like you've been really purposeful and intentional about letting go of some of the things that maybe are on that floating list or wish list that you know are just not going to make it onto your calendar. And
Yeah.
so how I think a lot of folks struggle with that is feel this like I have to get everything done or somebody asked me to do this or my kid needs cookies for school tomorrow or whatever that ask is. Maybe it's something that somebody wants us to do or something that we feel like we're supposed to do, some of these obligations. So how did you make that leap from, oh, it's on the list and I'm okay with that? So, yeah.
This is where a lot of the mind piece comes in, is that, we all want to do things. And I think we have to be really careful about how we approach what we want to do, because there are a lot of things that we really want to do that don't make it on the calendar. And they make it on the calendar for not necessarily good reasons. I was actually had a coaching call earlier today of someone who wanted, like in their backyard, this peaceful oasis of something, because she had very clear reasons for doing so. She wanted a garden, she wanted a pool, she wanted a place to relax. But when she thought about it, she's like, I can't afford it. And that was like the immediate thought was like, this is a limiting thought. And she's like, but it doesn't make any sense because I think that I can actually afford it. I'm not sure. So we broke it down into the different steps. And this is where it's helpful. Like if there's something you really want to do, is you have to be able to break it down into the steps that will actually go on the calendar. Like, having a backyard oasis does not fit on the calendar anywhere. It makes no sense. This is what we have a hard time with. But if we look and say, like, for one thing, it's like dreaming about stuff doesn't mean you have to do anything. So I think we're engaging 2 different areas of our brain. One is the dreaming, what we really want to
Yeah.
do. And we allow ourselves the space to do this. But then we have the practical side of us that's like, okay, well, that's great, but where does this fit? So we try to think that it's one way of thinking. So when we have this dream, we immediately shut it down. And so we create this conflict in our mind. But if you allow yourself the room to allow yourself to dream and not have to do anything, and fun fact, most of our neurons are inhibitory neurons. I mean, we're meant to dream, we're also meant to shut it down.
Hmm.
So, having like a different sheet of paper, and bullet journal is actually where I learned this lesson, is to be able to dream on paper and say, like, this is exactly, what I want my envisioned future to be like. Private practice is a very practical example of this. This is what I really wanted, but, if you think of how to do it, it'll shut you down. But if you think for a private practice, like, what do I need to do? Well, I need to get, an LLC or sign up for the practice management company. I need to find a place to practice. And, when you first, and insurance contracts, if you do that. So when you break it down to steps, you're like, now I have things that can actually go on the calendar. Now it's not, I don't know, or I can't do this, or I'm not sure what to do. Those are not helpful thoughts. When you say, like, and on my list of to-do things that make up this big thing, what actually fits on the calendar. And then before you know it, all of a sudden it goes on the calendar and you're already on your way to accomplishing what you really want to do. And that's really important, because it was interesting when we just did this and put this list of things like, well, I have to do this and I have to do that. The immediate thought that comes up is like, I don't know how. I mean, like, and that's usually what happens when we make our list. Like, I don't know how to do that. And then we shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And we ask ourselves, I mean, do I really not know how to get an estimate? Like, okay, well, I'll get an estimate, but how do I know that's the right one? And the thought underlying that is like, I don't know how much this is going to cost. I don't know how much this should cost. And then it's funny, like when you ask the question, the answer is very obvious. Well, then I'll get 3 estimates, you know? So it's just really interesting how our brain works. And we don't realize that there's the dreamer and then there's the shutting down. There's the realist within us. And we really need both of them to be our highest version of ourselves.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think we as humans have that capacity to dream and imagine this future. And
Yeah.
then when we start to encounter barriers in our minds that we're creating for ourselves, then we just, and maybe this client that you're talking about, maybe it wasn't that she couldn't afford it. Maybe she could, maybe she couldn't, but it sounds like that really wasn't the issue. The issue was she
Right.
didn't know where to start, and
Yeah.
breaking it down into really smaller excuse me, smaller steps, smaller tasks. And now she has something that she can actually go do. Like you said, get a backyard oasis. Where does that? Okay, on Thursday, I'm going to do that. Doesn't
Yeah.
work like that. It's okay. Look up a contractor, Google contractor, whatever that first next step is. I see that a lot. I had a coach years ago help me understand the difference between a task and a project.
Hmm.
And a lot of things on our to-do list, I notice this on my task list. I use bullet journal as well, are actually projects.
Hmm.
And when we realize that they have more than 3 steps and it's actually a project, that's why I'm not starting on it, because I don't know what the first step is. I see fix my bathroom as that's not a that's not a task. That's a project. So
Yes.
totally understand.
Another thing I learned from Castillo was when she puts a block of time on the schedule, it's not like I'm going to work on, my bathroom project. I mean, who knows what that even means? But she would say, like, I'm going to buy this, like, by the end of the hour, I'm going to have drawn a plan and made a shopping list for what to buy. So we make these little stepwise progress of things, in a discrete period of time. But instead of saying, I'm going to work on something, which doesn't really give us a direction, we'll say, like, at the end of this, I'm going to have this accomplished. And what I've learned is, 2 things. We both underestimate how long things take and we overestimate how long things take. Because if you say, like, my task for the week when it comes to my bathroom project is I'm going to come up with a list of things to do and then a shopping list of where to go, that actually may only take you about 10, 15 minutes, and you've already blocked an hour. So you've now got 45 minutes free. So that's where I found, when I was really clear about how long things took, then I put the appropriate amount of time on there. And so that's one thing, is a lot of times I found myself, it doesn't take as long. And the other one, and we all do this, how long notes take. I mean, if there's any
Yes.
delusional thinking, that is how long notes take. So, I mean, and you don't want to think about the fact, like, for me, like, our busy clinic where my nurse practitioner sees it and I see it too, and I have to manage her notes and mine and all the planning afterwards and things like that. It used to take me like many hours afterwards, and I never gave myself time for that. So I'd always wondered why I was behind. But when I started keeping track of that, I now know pretty reliably that I like to get there about an hour early. I'll get multiple interruptions because I've planned them now. That's part of the job.
Hmm.
And I'm also going to look at some notes. And if I don't give myself an hour before clinic, then I'm going to be interrupted and be annoyed by it. And I'm going to be a little bit behind and not looking at that. And then after clinic, it's going to be about 2 hours, like 2 solid hours, to get good notes completely done, leaving knowing that everything is free and clear. So then you start scheduling yourself differently. So for me in private practice, I have the ability to do that. So I started saying, like, don't book me, only book me in the morning. And I'll leave the afternoon for new breast cancer patients, which take me an hour, or a procedure, which typically takes like 30 minutes. But my nurse practitioner can see stuff because she's doing the notes. So I don't have to really account for her time doing the notes. I only have to account my time seeing the patients with her and co-signing notes. So I started to realize I can't book myself all day. I'm going to be there all day, but I can't book myself all day. So when you start giving yourself discrete amounts of time and of fact-based, think how long things take, now you have a math problem to solve. I either add more time there, or I have to move those tasks into clinic somehow, or give them to somebody else.
Right. Right. And what comes to mind for me when I hear you say that is what Martha Beck said on an EWP call a couple years ago. I don't know if you were on this, that she says it's the three B's. If there's something that has to get done, is you barter it, you better it, or you, oh gosh, I'm going to forget the third one, but it's basically what you
Buy help.
something along those lines is or bag it. That's what it was. Barter
I
it,
get,
better it,
yeah.
or bag it. Is it doesn't get done, you make it
Mhm.
fun, or you give it to somebody else. And so what you're saying is about being realistic about your time. Otherwise, you're thinking that you can fit a day's worth of notes into 15 minutes and realizing that no, this takes me 1 to 2 hours every day. I've got to block myself this time and account for interruptions because you know you're going to get interrupted. And so once you're realistic about that, you mentioned denial. If we're in denial, then we're just going to be frustrated all the time because we're constantly working against ourselves.
Yes. And I can tell you, this is probably true for most physicians, but it certainly is true for surgeons. Is one thought that we are always battling that is underlying seemingly everything we do is I don't want people to think I'm lazy.
Yeah.
And so that's why we typically do all the things like I'm not going to like pass this off to someone. They're going to think that I can't do it,
Yes.
won't do it, things like that. So that is a very pervasive thought that keeps us overworking, keeps us doing more than we think, keeps us from delegating. Once we start realizing that that is an underlying thought that we have, then we can ask, instead of like accepting the thought, we can now challenge it. Is delegating this task me being lazy? And then obviously, like when we put it out in the air, we're like, well, no, I mean, this is a very good way to do that. In fact, we sabotage our team if we do not use them. If they're just sitting there and we're paying them and we're not allowing them to help us, they're sitting over there not being helpful and they know it.
Right.
And and they know exactly whose fault it is. It's not theirs.
Yeah. I see this a lot in primary care too. And I think again, I work a lot with physicians. I know you work a lot with surgeons, and I don't know if I don't know if it's unique to the medical community or if it's just high achieving professionals, but there is a sense that we have to do it all ourselves. I think a lot of
Mhm.
that comes from our training. When we were students and residents, if we were asked to do something, then we had to go do it. And I'm old enough to remember where we had to go actually chase the physical films down, and we didn't
Mhm.
have digital radiology, so we had to go get the chest x-rays, get the films and bring them up, and we had to transport our own patients. I mean, we had to do these things that weren't really part of our medical training, but we were asked to do them, and we were penalized if we asked somebody else, asked the nurse or asked the tech or asked whoever to go do this thing that needed to get done. And so there's this sense that we have to do it all ourselves. I see
Yeah.
that a lot in my clients. Yeah.
Yes, and what we don't do is put ourselves in the shoes of the person who's supposed to be helping us. And that was, I think, the mistake that I made in my employee job is that I did not allow the people around me to help me. I thought that I was helping, and what I was doing was I was robbing them of the ability to get good at their jobs and feel good about what they did in their jobs. I didn't realize from their perspective that I was really, really sabotaging our relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want to encourage those people to grow and to make them feel like they're fulfilled in their jobs too. And so it's a win-win when you're able to delegate to them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. It sounds like you've really found a good system for yourself. You mentioned the purpose planner, you mentioned bullet journal, which I've been using for a couple years and it works for me. And so I'm sure you see this all the time. People talk about what systems you use and what type of planner and there's so many options that are out there. And so it sounds like you have honed what works for you. Is that a period of trial and error or what
Totally
was that
trial and
process
error.
like?
Yeah, I'm still learning too because like the purpose planner is kind of like, it's about the 8 by 11 or whatever, like a typical sheet of paper or stuff. And it goes in my bag. The problem is that I don't use it when I'm in the OR or things like that. So I have a separate book, which is just like, this is what I'm doing today, which is the stickers, the cases I'm doing, the consults I see to the right. So, I didn't want to have too many different systems, and I really think on paper, but I work digitally. So for me, the purpose planner is when I sit down and look at my week and I create the boundaries around the week. Like these are the things that are absolutely going to do. And then on to the right side is my list of to do things. So I look at the weekend part of planning, but day to day, I have like just a book that just fits in my pocket because it has to be portable. And then on digitally, I have a lot of things, and I've tried to make as many things automatic as possible. If someone books a call with me, it goes into something where I get an alert. So now I don't forget it if I don't write it down. If I put something on the Google Calendar, it migrates to again, an alert system, things like that. So you have to really get to know yourself. And for me, that I've created the physical and digital system that works, but I still have not mastered spending enough time with planning. So where typically a lot of these things they'll say like plan, on a Saturday or Sunday, something like that, plan for, or Monday, like Monday or one. So you have one day a week that you plan, but I'm finding like, by Wednesday, I need to reassess. So you have to really see what, and backtrack it. Cause I would think of like meal planning on Sunday and I'd be really good at it. And usually by like Wednesday, I would get busy. And then Thursday morning, I wake up and I'm like, I don't even really want to do what I planned to do, or I ran out and I didn't think that I would. And so then I started realizing that my planning fell apart like on Thursdays and Fridays, where it was just sort of like white knuckling going by. And on Tuesday, I would have this great, wonderful plan of, food, and realizing in between cases, I like basically if it's something that's not a charcuterie tray, I can't do it. Like grab it easy, I cannot have a salad. It takes too long. I can't have anything that requires heated up. So you just start asking yourself the essential part, which is assessing at the end of the week and say, okay, I've planned, I've worked it, and I assessed it and say like what worked and what didn't. And almost always it's I need more time planning, and I underestimate how long things take, because the free time I usually fill with reading or something like that. But the times that cause the most distress is underestimating how long something takes.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense about looking back. And it's kind of that definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and
Oh
over and
yeah.
trying to get different results, as if you
Oh yeah,
don't look
Thursday
back
comes
and
around every
see.
single day. I'm like, what? Tuesday
Right.
comes around. I'm like, why did I pack this? I mean, it
Yeah.
stays in my lunchbox, and then I take it back home.
Right. Right. And it sounds like you're able to do that in a very non-judgmental way with yourself,
Oh yeah.
because that's you've learned, and you're a coach and have gotten coached. And so
Well, I'm not
I
saying I don't judge myself. Those are not always like. I mean, like at the end, I'm like, really? Are we doing this again?
Well, and we all do that, right? But it sounds like you're able to either notice that and, hey, I'm judging myself there. Is that judgy voice again? Or, well, you tell me
Yeah.
what's your inner dialogue around that?
Oh no, now I can become more of a passive observer of it. Before I would just feel in distress, and I wouldn't really have a name on it. And then I realized it's like I was judging myself for like packing something that I knew I shouldn't have. And then now I can kind of laugh about it, like, oh look, there I go again, doing the same thing over again. And then, oh
Yeah.
look, there I go, judging myself for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really embracing a little bit of amusement about your own life. So first becoming the passive observer, and then being simply fascinated by what you do, and then you kind of transition to being amused by what you do. And then
Hmm.
I don't know, because a lot of times, we're just all doing the best we can. And I think really letting go of the perfectionist side of us is the hard part. And I think letting go of the perfectionist side is putting things in perspective, telling us the truth, being open and honest, assessing from a place of non-judgment. And when we realize we can't get there most of the time, we at least could laugh about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like what you said before about it's on the list,
It's on the
right?
list.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, you always want to give yourself space ahead of time to prevent yourself from judging it. So like, having that like on the list. So now I could, kind of like reach this place of like, it's okay if it's on the list and I don't do it. I'm actually not worried about that. And even when I started my private practice, the thought that really took me through was I was going to make as few mistakes as possible. So in my words to myself ahead of time, I'm already giving myself an out to be human and let life happen.
I love that.
Yes. And then I
That's
have to forgive
important.
myself. I've already kind of planned ahead to be a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like what you said, planning for those barriers, planning for those times when things aren't going to go as planned.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been so amazing talking to you. Is there anything else that
Likewise.
you want to share with our listeners before we close out?
No, I mean, I think that listening to podcasts like this, really just opening ourselves up to just new ways of thinking. And I think that's the one thing that the coaching journey has really helped me, is to explore really how we're experiencing the world, and from a place of, letting go of the things that medical training has taught us, which is perfectionist thinking, you're lazy, and overworking, and looking at all those things in a different way of saying, well, of course, that's how I was trained, but I don't have to keep doing this now that I have a different perspective. So I offer myself different thoughts along the way that make everything a lot more reasonable.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your message. I love seeing the quotes that you post on Facebook. I know James Clear is somebody that you've followed, and Atomic Habits. You probably read that book a couple times. I know I have. And so I really
Yes.
resonate with things that you post. And I know you, since you are a general surgeon and you work mostly with surgeons, your message resonates with all physicians. And so I appreciate that about you and love that about you. So where can we find you, Dr. Vertrees?
Sure. I think the easiest place is the website bosssurgery.com. And if you want to be part of my ongoing book club on Facebook, I actually do post a lot of stuff. Everyone is part of my book club and they don't know that. So you'll know exactly what I'm reading, because I do post quotes from Kindle from that. Mostly because, like, when I post that, people resonate back their thoughts and I learn even more. So that's probably the two best places to find me. And I also have another Facebook group called Become the Boss MD, which is for any physician, where we talk about just different things that come up too. So this is an ongoing discussion of things that are really resonating with all of us, because I think that if I share my thoughts and people reflect theirs back, we all learn. I think that's really what we all have to offer in this common community that we have.
Yes, I love that. So relatable, so authentic, and just love your message and what you're putting out there. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate you having
Yeah.
podcasts like this, because I mean, I think we all need to kind of come together, because we really are the change. It's these little things. It's not the big things that are going to change the world. It's little things like this.
Yes, absolutely agree. Thanks so much, Dr. Vertrees. Good to have you.
Likewise.
Thank you for listening to the Purposeful MD podcast. If you like what you hear, please rate and review the show. Please also visit my website, www.thepurposefulmd.com, for free downloads or to discuss working with me as your coach.